Here's how I made the top and the belt of this dark fae fantasy look. I'm using Cosclay, which is a flexible polymer clay. Before I begin, I'm just prepping my space by wrapping some plastic wrap around my sewing mat. And this really helped not only because the clay is a pretty messy, but the mat itself does have graphs and measurements on it, which really came in handy during the creative process. And I can link where I got this below. I made one of these tops before from a tutorial from Charity Grace, which is super awesome. I'll link that below. I made this one a little too thin, so it cracked, so this time I'll make it much thicker. Using some basic craft wire, I'm going to start by mapping out the shape for the second top. I do want it to be a very similar shape because I really loved this one. I just want it to be thicker so that it doesn't crack, and I do want it to be slightly bigger because I was getting some nip slips with this one. After I get a general idea of the frame size that I'm going to need, I just simply double that and start to cut a second piece to make the second cup because I do create the cups individually before attaching them together. Once I have my wires cut, I start to take measurements of the top that I already have with some flexible measuring tape. And this is just to give me an idea of the frame size that I need to build for this second top. I did not use any sort of measurements for the first top that I made. I just generally eyeballed it and then kind of mapped it out on my body to get the right sizing. And while this was helpful with trial and error, it's totally not necessary to have specific measurements. You can really just build this by mirroring it off of your body and adjusting and eyeballing it and framing it as you go along. Building the frame is a process in and of itself, so just trust the journey and feel free to just make adjustments as you go. Once I had a shape that I liked for the first cup, I start to mirror the second one so that they're ready to attach with strapping tape. I start by strapping the cups individually before I strap them together to make the complete top base. And now that I have my basic frame, I just start to get an idea of where I want it to lay on my body and how big I need the cups to be for this top to be a little bit bigger and to fit me a little bit better. And then I start to take those measurements of what I did on my body and start to map them out to the top that I already have, just to make sure I'm not going to get any more nip slips with this one, but that it's still kind of following the symmetry of the previous top that I made because I'm super in love with how that one came out. Especially these little pointed corners that are kind of lifted off the body. I was going for like a butterfly fade top, so I really thought this added like a special touch to the top. Now that I have a shape that I love, I just start perfecting the frame by smoothing out and then taking some basic measurements to make sure that this top is symmetrical as well. Now I'll be taking some very thin craft wire and wrapping it around the frame to create some more texture for the clay to wrap onto. And again, I learned everything I'm doing from Charity Grace's tutorial, so definitely check her out and follow her if you don't already. We're finally ready for clay. And when you first start working with this, it is a little bit hard and chunky and some pieces start to break off a little bit. You can catch them just by rolling the clay around on it. That's why having the plastic below is really helpful. And then it does start to soften the more you work with it. This whole process took me quite a while to really get enough clay that I wanted to try to cover the entire cup, because it's just a little easier to try to get a piece to cover the whole cup in and of itself as opposed to piecing the pieces together. I just found that it created a little bit more of a uniform, solid look and really eliminated the need for, unnecessary blending if I can get a full sweep of it. And with this solid piece of clay, from there, it's pretty easy just to start wrapping the clay and molding it around the frame, taking off any excess pieces that we don't need and we can possibly save for later, and start to give a nice shape to our base so that it starts to look like this. Now that we've got one side done, it's just repeating the process with the other side. And as I'm going along and finishing this frame, I'm being as delicate as I can, adding clay where it needs to be, and just being as mindful as possible because the clay itself is quite fragile until it's baked. So I'm just being very careful as I'm finishing the center of this top and smoothing out the clay as I go along. Now that that is baking in the oven, it's time to start recreating this really cool, cute, swirly waist piece. And this is a super cute pointed tipped waist belt that has little hooks at the end of it so that you can take string or ribbon to attach it around your waist. So now that I have the waist piece done, I'm moving on to this hip piece, which as you can see, I totally busted the original version that I made. So that's just something for me to keep in mind for later, which, spoiler alert, I totally ran out of clay later in this tutorial. Thought I totally messed everything up, but you sometimes you just got to trust the process. So you'll see later how I did my best to remedy that. Once I created the main piece that the little wings hook onto, which is essentially the same exact thing as the waist piece I already made, I just start to take wire and generally get a vague shape of what I did last time. Again, keeping in mind that I do want to make this a little bit bigger, which I didn't realize at the time would totally, not be the greatest idea, but it's okay. This is why I make these tutorials and want to show you the totally honest process of what happened and hopefully, give you some courage that if you end up messing up on your own projects, there are always ways to fix them. Since I'm trying to make these as symmetrical as possible, I am using 2 wires to bend at the same time, creating the top wings together so I can get them as even as I can. And it's the same sort of thing as with making the top. You just have to trust the process and shape and reshape as you go along, doing the best as you can. So once I got the wings a shape that I like, I start to carefully attach them to the hip piece. And I'm sorry, I totally forgot to film making the second little bottom wings, but it's essentially the same exact process as the top wings. And this is where my sewing mat really comes in handy because I'm just making sure the measurements are aligning on the mat. Once I'm cool with that, I bend the whole design in half to start to map out the wings together to make them as symmetrical as I can before opening it back up again. I totally forgot to record the beginning of this, but as you can see, this is where the project started to become a disaster. I ran out of clay and did not have enough to complete and cover all of the wire, and I needed this costume to be done in a couple of days, so I had no option of ordering any more. So I just had to suck it up and deal with it because I still had some more pieces that I needed to get covered in clay, and I had to prioritize at that time. But when the top came out of the oven, I started to see the light at the end of the tunnel because I absolutely love the top so much. It's honestly my favorite creation so far. And now it was time to start adding all of the really cool details on it. So that was exciting. And to do this, I'm just rolling out little detailed strips to place onto the already baked top and then just gently trying to smooth that clay out into the baked clay. Now it's ready to be baked again with the other pieces, and this is how they came out. If you want details on how to make this super cool wavy piece, that is in Charity's tutorial below. As for the belt piece, as you can see, because I ran out of clay, it is not cute. It totally was a fail, and I tried so many different methods to trying to fix this, but it doesn't seem like any of it was working. I tried sanding. I tried, multiple methods of sanding, but as you can even see from how the wire frame was baked, it just didn't come out symmetrical. What the left side is totally has like a bend while the right one is straight. It was just a super fail. This obviously didn't do much, so I just had to move on. I painted the pieces black, which gave this super cool effect, and I really loved it on the top and the waist piece. And it kind of helped the belt piece give it a little bit better of a look. It still had its struggles, but I was counting my blessings at this point. It was time to add some more details and shine to this, so I took some Mod Podge and then mixed it with this really cool iridescent color that gives this like cosmic blue sheen. Once I had that mixed, I took a simple paintbrush and started painting that mixture onto the details of the top, only sticking to the extra clay details because I was really focusing on creating dimension within the full black outfit. I use that same concept when painting the details on the waist piece. For the belt piece, my only strategy was to simply trust the process and hope something turned out. I kept adding more and more of the shimmery mixture to create a pattern that would create some sort of balance and symmetry on the piece to distract away from the pieces where I wish I had more clay to make it more symmetrical. This is how the color turned out. While the belt is not perfect, it's definitely got some character. I love the blue, and I'm absolutely in love with how this top came out. Luna's proud too. Now it's time to make some straps. To do that, I'm going to be cutting some felt, measuring it on the back of the cup, and then making little straps thick enough that I can fit through these rings that I'll be putting string through. From there, I looped the felt through the ring, and then I sewed it together. Once those were done, it was time to map out where I wanted my straps to be and then glue them into place using E6000. Once that was done, I ended up with 4 straps that I can use swimsuit string to make ties with. The last piece was just adding this black gemstone to the centerpiece just for some extra bling and detail. This is how it all came out, completed with the full costume. And while it wasn't a perfect process, there were many challenges along the way. I am happy with how it all came out. Tell me what you think in the comments, and if you'd like me to do more of these tutorials, because I do make all my own costumes. It is quite a process, but I am totally in love with it. So if you want to see more, let me know. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe for more. And you can follow me on Instagram at Jasmine_enchanted, as well as my new account at Moonless Designs, which focuses on my costume designs. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.